Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it. My name is Pat Collette. I'm with Godlin, and I'll be your solo presenter today. From a Godlin perspective, Godlin has years of experience with Infor products, business intelligence tools, and in this case, specifically Birst. So a deep knowledge of SyteLine and doing implementations as both an alliance partner and as a channel partner. From my perspective, Owen Collette is sitting in the background as part of this presentation. But again, I'll be the solo presenter, but between myself, Owen, and others, we've got years of experience with BI solutions, Infor products, including their ERP solutions. And we've been working with Birst ever since Infor acquired Birst a number of years ago. And we also provide support to other SyteLine partners from a Birst perspective. So one of the things that we get asked a lot is, why Birst? And part of the answer to why Birst is, Birst is a very solid analytic tool, BI tool. But part of that answer is also why Birst is the tool set that surrounds Birst is part of the experience. So the idea here is that, having analytics become a part of, everyday life in terms of what the user experiences. So from that perspective, if I come out to Infor OS in general and my login entry point into Infor OS, what you can see is, Birst Analytics surfaced as part of the everyday experience that somebody would have as they go through Infor OS. So you can see it here graphically. We've got some other things in home pages where you can put Birst content into home pages throughout the entirety of the user experience. And the other thing that we could do is that we can interact between Birst and the SyteLine ERP. So for example, I can bring myself back into the ERP from a Birst visualization that is surfaced within Infor OS, but also have the interactivity where I've now come back into the customer and I can explore that customer from a SyteLine perspective. Now, we do implementations both for on-premise SyteLine customers and those that are in the cloud. So the experience might be somewhat different for those that are on-premise, but please understand that we can deploy our solution as part of the overall landscape of what we, from a Birst perspective. Okay. So, but what's at the center of this is our content from what we're calling a QuickStart perspective. And again, surrounding it with the fuller set of Infor tools and an ability to do things again, like surface that content within Infor OS, be able to drill back into the ERP, put reports out to Infor document management from a notification perspective, but and leverage what's called data fabric to, as data as kind of the lifeblood of bringing data into any analytic tool, and in this case, Birst, but essentially an automated way of bringing data to what's called the data lake as part of data fabric, and then that data being ingested into Birst. So with our QuickStart content, we're trying to drive a quick time to value. We're trying to leverage the entirety of the tool set that's available to us from a Infor perspective. And then we're looking at future opportunities with things like artificial intelligence and Coleman, and being able to leverage artificial intelligence models to ingest that data into Birst as well. But for the purposes of this discussion, one of the main focal points is going to be what we're calling our QuickStart content, which is a way for SyteLine customers to jumpstart their process of getting started with Birst. So the other thing from a Birst perspective is that this content, and taking advantage of that holistic content that we're bringing in from SyteLine, is the ability to share that information with users in other ways. So I had showed the ability to come into Infor OS and experience the content there. We're going to be spending a decent amount of time in the Birst interface itself, but there are also native applications for Apple and Android to consume Birst content. There's also an ability to share content from Birst via what are called notifications and send reports out to interested individuals via an email distribution, or to, again, put that content out to Infor document management as a way of consuming it and storing it. But I will always say that the best way to consume Birst content is dynamically within the application, which really speaks to coming into the portal to consume it, going to Birst, the fuller application of Birst, or experiencing that information on the go via mobile apps. Okay. Now, again, we're going to talk a bit about this Godlin QuickStart content that we have in a way to absolutely jumpstart the process with SyteLine content. But as we've worked with customers, they've had a need to bring in data from other sources for various reasons. So, for example, legacy data from, I'm going through an ERP conversion and I want to combine data together with my go forward SyteLine data. I have sister companies that I want to blend data together with my SyteLine data. I want to be able to bring in, budget or forecast, sales forecast or budget information from a secondary source, maybe even as simple as a flat file. So, and then other various, Infor applications or third-party applications. So what we're looking for is to leverage the core of our QuickStart content and to piggyback off of that and perhaps bring in other data, via the connectors. Now, there's a point of delineation on, the investment in Birst. And so as part of a cloud-based ERP purchase, you're getting Birst as part of that, but you can upgrade Birst to allow for ingestion of third-party data via these other connectors. But you can also leverage the data lake to bring data into that as a source for Birst. So again, taking a holistic approach of how do I look at my business? How do I want to bring data into Birst? And then starting with that core ERP data that's coming from SyteLine. Okay, so this is where we get into our QuickStart content and looking at what we're delivering as part of getting customers jump started with this, and really focused on getting quick time to value and rapid deployment. So we are thoughtfully going out to either the data lake or the underlying ERP database for on-premise and bringing data into Birst through extraction logic. We're going through what's called a modeling process to make that available for reporting, and then adding thoughtful calculations or KPIs that become part of the data set for reporting. So, and we're doing that across a broad set of data, and I'll talk about some of the details of that data here in just a few minutes. But in addition to that, we've built some dashboard and reporting content that you can leverage as part of the initial implementation. So this all gets promoted into your environment, stood up pretty quickly, connected to the data sources, and deployed, relatively rapidly. And we're going again through a thoughtful process of integrating some of your user fields that often speaks to, some nuances to how you view your business. And things like different types of businesses that we work with in the past will have needs to look at things in pounds or tons or hundredweight. We'll have integrations that speak to the different revenue models that somebody might have for doing configurations, and a need to understand configurations that have come in from something like CPQ, EQ. So those are nuances that we agree to and build into this, and basically to extend, what we have as part of our core. But again, there's a lot of heavy lifting in what we've done and what we're deploying immediately with the integration to Birst, and also reporting content that goes with it. And we support this with package training, working sessions, is working with you as a customer to understand your needs and extend the solution. And we find it to be easily extensible to meet the needs of any given business. Okay. So in the category of, who and why, we can and have deployed this for commercial customers in both on-premise and in the cloud. We have deployed this also for customers that are in the governed cloud. And we can do it with or without having upgraded to the fuller version of Enterprise, which is really about unlocking the additional connectors from a Birst perspective. And so again, why would you want to do this? Strategic analytics with rapid deployment and not having to wait, months or years, to deploy things and deploying things quickly. So we like to say that it comes assembled, but it can be extended or enhanced, and you get immediate integration to a broad set of SyteLine data. It can be flexibly extended. We're offering standard calculations to enhance it, things like on-time delivery, early or late, bucketing of accounts receivable, accounts payable. Those are examples of certain calculations. And then we make sure to do currency handling, certainly within sites. And if we've got multiple site deployments, we will handle currency across sites with an agreed to methodology depending on the needs of the customer. And as I mentioned, we're going to be going through some of the dashboard and reporting content with an ability to add additional reporting content, often driven by, differing revenue models and things of that nature. And then we have a proven deployment process where we have, successful referenceable customers that is part of this. So a little bit of an eye chart here, but basically just want to give you the sense that we are bringing in a broad set of data as part of this integration to make it available for reporting. Just gives you a sense for it on the left-hand side there, and just, core SyteLine data. And we can flexibly turn on or turn off certain function depending on whether you use it as a, in your implementation. So some examples of that is some customers do or don't use projects, some don't use, service contracts, et cetera. So again, very flexibly turn it on or off. And if you decide to use a certain function later on, it can simply be turned back on. And what that serves to do is kind of reduce maybe some of the clutter of what doesn't need to be shown from a user perspective within the application. And then here you see kind of a 360-degree view of items. So when you look at what's happened and when that data comes into Birst, you can analyze things like customers or items or strategically, your sales team or geography or timeframes, and do that, across, and in this case, an example again of a 360-degree view of items and looking at all the transactional things that happen related to an item or a customer, or your sales team, et cetera. Okay. And just a quick aside, we have built some content for CPQ, EQ. We happen to have content for some different Infor ERP systems like Infor XA, and we have certainly done integrations for other things like Infor CPQ. Okay. So with that, I'm going to kind of come back to the dashboard here again and just kind of reiterate the ability, or to the Infor OS homepage, and reiterate the ability to come in here and experience content as part of your ongoing workday, to be able to share some of this content into something like Infor Document Management, be able to go from a visualization that's on a dashboard and take yourself, directly back into the Birst application, and then also to be able to interact and go back into, drill back into CloudSuites as part of the user experience. Okay. So it's not really my intent to get into the details of the ingestion of data into Birst. But suffice it to say, where the rubber meets the road is in the reporting. So I'm now making my way into Birst as an application. You can come at Birst standalone again, depending on your deployment. But in this case, I'm coming at it as an application as part of the overall Infor OS framework. And now you're starting to see some of the benefits of what I'm calling the quick start and the data that's been brought into Birst. And if you look at kind of the overall life cycle that goes on within a business, what we're seeing here on a corporate level dashboard is the ability to look at, starting at the front end, and how do I go to market, and how do I bring my customers, how do I sell to customers? And am I doing things like tracking, quotes as they get converted into orders within SyteLine, or do I have a secondary application that's helping me manage that process? But from a pure SyteLine perspective, we're seeing, KPIs, and Birst will summarize to whatever level you ask it a question. So starting very top level and looking at KPIs all the way down to a level of detail. So what I tell people with the QuickStart content is that we bring data in at the same level that you would think about it in the ERP, yet we're able to ask Birst top level questions in summarization, and we're able to look across the entirety of the business and the life cycle of the business. So again, from a quote into booking orders, and once I booked orders, the ability to look at and report against and manage backlog, different metrics about, dynamically calculating things down to, today, and understanding my past due backlog as both in terms of numbers and percentages, shipment volumes and dollars, margins on those shipments, looking at how well I'm servicing my customers from an on-time delivery performance perspective, and having some indicators here to tell me whether I think I'm doing things, relative to what the goals of the organization are by having like up, down arrows and indicators. And then, after I've kind of sold and shipped my product, do I have a service aspect to my business? And, in certain revenue models and customers that we work with, they might be lighter manufacturing and heavier service. And we can adjust, the reporting based on the entirety of the data that we're bringing in to react to that. But we're able to track, things as, on the backside of I've already shipped products and now I have service orders. And then as I go through the life cycle of producing those orders, managing my assets, managing my inventory, looking at open work in process, et cetera. So again, very top level KPIs across the entirety of the data set and across the business, and an ability to get a snapshot of the business at a top level. And again, an ability to slice and dice information by customers and looking at my top tier customers by month and by year, looking at things based on geography, based on shipped to or sold to states, an ability to, kind of look at things across time. And Birst has a natural ability to look at trend analysis, look at time, break things down by year, by quarter, by month, down into a week and right on down to a day. And the ability to do that based on a day is due to the fact that we're bringing the data in at that level within Birst. And then you can see, projecting out and being, more proactive in terms of looking at things. And in this case, leveraging the combination of open order amounts and counts, and using different dates that are supplied to me by the ERP, and using those as what are called analyzed by dates to look at, in this case, customer order line item due date, and projecting things out forward. This database happens to be grounded in data that's more focused on 2023, but essentially it's looking at all open orders and projecting forward. And I can do that at various levels of granularity. So not only looking at historically what's happened to me as a business, but where am I at? Where have I been? Where am I at? And where am I going? And trying to look forward and be more predictive in terms of that. You take advantage of the full data set that we have in what we're bringing into Birst by being able to break down things by site, again, by time frame. But we can also do different filtering techniques within Birst, and I'll talk more about those as I start to roll forward through the rest of the delivered content. So looking at the business top level, but then starting to get down into the various functional areas or personas or areas of responsibility within the business, and looking at things like sales management, production planning, inventory control, service, purchasing, quality, AR and accounts, AP and AR management, et cetera. So if I delve a level deeper down into the sales management aspect of this, I can start to look at, some of the feature function that's within Birst, and I can start taking even a deeper advantage of what's been built in terms of standard calculations in the data model and also the data. So, and what you would have noticed is, and one of the things that we're striving for is a single version of the truth. So things are being consistently calculated. So getting yourselves out of the mode of, extracting data to Excel and having to mash it around, or using, other techniques to get data out. So instead, we're taking advantage of the continuum of the automated publishing out of the ERP or the ingestion of data into Birst from the ERP on a scheduled basis, and in bringing that in and having it already be modeled and readily available. So I'll just pick on this metric here of this 70% on-time delivery. And when I go a level deeper, because of the consistency in how this has been structured, you'll see that the KPI here has exactly the same value. So no more debating or arguing about how things are calculated. And we may, in some cases, adjust some of the calculations in our deployment for your organization, but at least you're starting with a baseline, and we come to a common understanding of what these things mean, what the calculations are, so that there's consistency in reporting. And then we can use different, from a Birst dashboard perspective, we can take advantage of the different slicing and dicing of information. So I'm looking at things by territory or by product. And in this case, I can do things like drag my mouse, and essentially decide I want to highlight those 3 territories and dynamically be able to start looking at things by a territory breakdown. And those territories would have come from, the management of those as attributes in your ERP, and then they would have come in from SyteLine into Birst, and we are simply taking advantage of the relationship between transactional data and master data in the data model. So, again, you can dynamically filter things on the fly. You can drill down and drill through things. So, for example, we can create thoughtful drill paths within Birst based on the data set that we have here. So if I expand this a little bit, we'll see that we're coming down from a product line down to an item level. Now we can define, various different drill paths within Birst based on the overall data model. So we're not confined to just drilling down through items. I could drill down through items and across to customers, et cetera. And when we start to get a better sense as we delve deeper into this, if I look at my on-time delivery performance, based on categories of items or down to specific items, as an example. And then I can, reset myself and come back to the beginning. We're able to look at, again, time series analysis, and in this case, looking at a rolling 12 months, and then we can break things down by, time frames. So kind of continuing on into, and I can create an experience, or we have created an experience in here while I drill across based on a year. I come across, I go a level deeper, and then I can start to dissect, which customers have been, in terms of on-time delivery, have I satisfied better than others, and start to analyze things at a deeper depth and get into root cause analysis about, perhaps where my challenges are, my opportunities. Okay, so coming back here again, from a sales management perspective, I'm going to go into a dashboard around orders and quotes. And so again, the sense you should get here is that, we've taken a broad-based approach in the data that we're bringing in. And in this case, I'm looking at metrics related to quotes and orders and the delineation between the two, and also conversion of quotes to orders as I roll into my roll through my sales process. So again, broken down by time frames. If I go into an analysis of booking and shipping, now I can start to see things at a, by looking at bookings versus shipments, and then the breakdown by territory, by product groupings of my items, or a top 10, relationship to customers. And I can do things again, like I can filter in here and go a level deeper into the data and start to slice and dice the information. I could do that flexibly because of the way this is built, and I can look at things again by item, or I could start looking at things by territory. And so I'm simply dragging my mouse, taking advantage of the relationships in what's been built here to look at, how, going levels deeper and looking at my data. And it, again, creates an on-the-fly ability to filter the data further, and I can decide if I want to include other attributes, in the filtering technique. But again, think about your sales, think about your orders and your bookings and your backlog, and how you might want to view that from a business perspective, both in terms of geography, your sales organization, your items, your customers, et cetera. Okay. All right, and then the management of backlog, as part of the sales organization. So looking at things in terms of past dues, numbers of days late, a Pareto analysis of top 10 items and customers for past due, and a concept in here of looking at things at a level of summary, again at a KPI level, maybe kind of a mid-level summary based on customers and items, and then an ability to kind of look at things at more of a granular level and get down into things at a down to a customer level and look at those same metrics at a deeper level, and then cut across the entirety of the data model. In this case, I'm looking at backlog, but I'm also making an assessment of that backlog based on, on-hand quantities, release quantities from jobs. Perhaps if I'm doing some, buyout purchase order type things for customers, looking at it from that perspective. But it gives you a sense of the ability to cut across the entirety of your data and form, sort of intuitive analyses of not just within a particular area, but across the entirety of the data model. Okay. And as I roll through here, we just start getting into other functional areas and starting to look at, the production process and jobs and the ability to look at things, in this case, by a work center. And everything again from a, top level sort of graphic here and an ability to intuitively filter and then watch it basically have an impact on both summarized and detailed reporting. So again, we're right down to the job level at a detailed level, but we can also live at a top level KPI level or anywhere in between. Okay. Inventory valuation and the management of assets, the critical management of significant assets in terms of on-hand quantities of inventory, open work orders and work in process. And then again, in this case, looking at things by family code, but then an ability to use another technique to basically expand and look at things down to the item level in this case. So what we tried to create here was just an intuitive experience. Number one, supply all the requisite data to be able to do this and have it readily available on a very regular basis. And then some level of reporting to take advantage of that, and an ability for you as a customer, potential customer, to expand and create some of your own reporting and using different functions within the system. Okay. Just kind of rolling through here some more examples in terms of service and looking at things, from a service level perspective, number of service orders completed, what's my performance against them week to week, by geography, by quarter, by month, by day. And, in this case, looking at the service orders within SyteLine to make those assessments. And then, the procurement side of the business and looking at dynamically, again, standard calculations of past due PO line items, late deliveries from suppliers. Who are my top 5 culprits in terms of suppliers that are delivering to me late, and those types of analyses. What percent is late? And then analyzing spend from an overall perspective and looking at, open purchase orders, yes, but also analyzing spend and then being able to do that by supplier, by warehouse, by, any attributes that you can think of that exist within SyteLine. And then again, down to a level of granularity, down to the PO line item level. Okay. All right. And then quality is one where we can look at it from an RMA perspective within this. This is another area, though, that we've looked at with customers where we may have extended our content. Often there are different quality metrics that exist outside the ERP, so we're looking for thoughtful ways to integrate that data into Birst and make it with an association to other attributes that are already in our master data that's within Birst. So by work center, by warehouse, by site, et cetera. But in this case, this is an assessment of RMA activity by time frame, with dollar amounts and an ability to, look at it for differing time frames like anything else within Birst. Accounts receivable management is another area, and then looking at, again, top level KPIs and the bucketing of receivables, which can be adjusted to meet your needs. But looking at, a Pareto analysis again of customers that are late in terms of accounts receivable, and then going through, some comparisons to credit limits, a detailed aging table that could go right on down to the invoice level, and then looking at metrics, payment metrics by customers. What is my experience with customers, and how often are they paying, within terms or not? What's the variation between that? And if I'm trying to do things like cash flow projections, how do I look at that from a cash flow perspective to understand if I'm using things like OpenAP, OpenAR, and other things to do kind of a cash flow projection? How do I kind of modify that projection based on my actual experience with my customers and my payment patterns, both in and out in terms of AR versus accounts receivable or versus accounts payable? Okay. And then some content related to accounts payable management. So I didn't go into every functional area that we have reporting on, and I went through, some of went through the various dashboards to give you a sense for it. But suffice it to say that we're bringing in a broad and deep set of data, and we've created reporting and dashboarding as part of the standard delivery of what we're calling the QuickStart. And one of the things, again, it's a major aspect of this is the delivery of data and making data available to to you in terms of the standard reporting content, but also if you need to develop additional reporting. So with that, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about feature function at a dashboard level, and then I'm going to get into just a deeper dive on the data set a little bit, and then we'll handle questions as we get towards the end. So let me go to here. So one of the things that we can do again here is just in terms of the feature function at a dashboard is I can share content via notifications, and I can schedule things to send reports out of Birst, and I can share those reports either with Infor document management, or I can go out to an email distribution list, and I can make that email distribution list dynamic if I need to. So again, it's extending the reach of Birst by sharing data. I can download or print things from a dashboard perspective as printable PDFs as a way of interacting. And then I've got feature function at a dashboard level where I can explore things and go straight back into the reporting tool. And so not only experience the dynamic nature of being able to report on the data set that we brought in, but also be able to have my cake and eat it too in terms of being able to come into here, make modifications to certain reporting, and do a save as it is an efficient way of building additional content. Okay. And I can also export things to Excel from here and interact with Excel if I want to. So I can put things out to Excel or printable PDF from a report or what's called a dashboard level. And I can change my view on the fly up to six different options depending on the chart or graph. So the overall concept here is to leverage what is being delivered, perhaps do some adjustment to it if needed, and be able to efficiently do a save as, or do a deeper ad hoc analysis, and also put things out to reporting as I need to. Okay. All right. So with that, excuse me, with that, I'm going to go over to the visualizer tool. And just kind of go through it, run through again, just to kind of to highlight the fact that we would structure this a bit sometimes into what are called subject areas, but to give you a sense for the breadth of data again, it's across a pretty broad set of data, and this becomes available. So as users need to extend this, if I want to do something based on a margin analysis, I can easily search for it, bring the data into Visualizer, do things like use these what are called analyzed by dates with Birst, and I'll do it based on ship date. And let's say I want to do kind of a top 10 analysis of my customers. So I will pull in customer combined, and again taking advantage of the data that's been brought into Birst. And if I decide I want to do a top 10 analysis, I can do things like pull this down into a sort, do a sort descending, tell it I want to do a top 10. And then there's other feature function in Birst that I can use to, do things like I can cluster the data so that I can break things down into, kind of size ranges of data and make it pop off the page for analysis. And easily, you can see I'm doing things with basically single mouse clicks, and I'm able to display the values and then perhaps format the values accordingly. So as you can see, based on the delivered data set and the data model, if I need to build additional reporting, I can easily go out and search, select, pick, and do different, things across differing timeframes, or with different attributes. And, I can pull things out of here and decide I want to do, a further analysis. And in this case, let's say I want to look at things across time. So again, taking advantage of these dates that we're bringing in from the ERP. And, excuse me, I meant to pull in the year. So I can start with a year, and I can decide that I want to sort this based on, I want to look at the current year first, and then perhaps I want to do a bit of a trend analysis within Birst. So those are things that are easily done within Birst to kind of look at things, again, a trend analysis over time, including both forwards and backwards in time, and taking advantage of the various attributes that are within Birst. And again, I can pull things out of here. And if I want to look at things like geography, and let's say I search for, state, and I pull in the ship to state, and I can turn this into a geo map. And then from here, I can go and decide, what map I'm going to associate this to. In some cases, we pulled in custom maps for customers. But in this case, I'm just going to focus on states, and you can see how quickly I can look at things geographically. And behind the scenes here, there's a relatively detailed map. So that's why we can load in custom maps if you want to look at things at a deeper level from a mapping perspective. And, I mentioned the ability to cut across the data model. So if I turn this back into a table, just to kind of give you a sense for it, I'm looking at things by province or state. But if I want to look at, a breakdown of my products, so if I pull in the product code, and let's say I pull in the customer combined here again, and when these combined fields is something that we've created as both the number and the name, or a code and a descriptor. And then I can start slicing and dicing my data and doing, things like I want to look at it by product code first. And I want to, and then down into customers and then by state. Or I can reverse that and decide that I want to look at it first by state and then by product code. And what this speaks to is we're taking advantage of the fact that all these data points have been brought in from the ERP as a matter of quick deployment, and they're available to do, strategic analysis of your data, at a deeper level. So everywhere from a KPI, again, all the way up to a top level. All right. So just one second here. So just to recap, again, we've built the extraction logic to pull the data into Birst. We've gotten the data ready for reporting. We've thoughtfully added some additional KPIs for reporting, and then we've delivered some dashboard and reporting content. And all that comes as part of a project that is quickly deployed. And then, and then we're integrating some of your user fields as part of that to give further meaning to the data. And we're supporting that with package training, and working sessions, et cetera. Okay. So with that, I think we've got about 20 minutes here. I got through the content a bit faster than I had thought I would, but I want to open it up for questions, and that might lead us back into looking at some things within Birst itself.
Awesome, Pat. You've got lots of questions, so hopefully you can get through them all. The first one is, how do you leverage the Infor OS functional security in Birst?
Okay, so within Birst, we create what are called account groups. Those account groups have, they're given certain functional security. And these account groups appear in Infor OS. So we add them as roles in Infor OS. So what you're driving with these account groups is, am I a Birst user? What functional security do I have in terms of the function? And you can define this within Birst. And then what are called spaces within Birst, what do I have access to? And then on a deeper level, you can also drive content security by looking at the foldering structure within Birst. So you have dashboard collections and report folders, and you would assign those account groups to both of those to drive content security. And then one of the things that we've done to make the deployments even more efficient is data security. So that's a deeper level, and what you're trying to strive for is efficient creation of dashboard and reporting content, and then leveraging the data security. So envision you've got multiple sites within SyteLine, and you want to allow only those users from a given site to see their data, but there might be others that you exempt from that. So we've done some really good deployments of that with customers where a warehouse was analogous to something that was called a branch. There was 80 to 100 of these branches. If I'm a branch level person, I see the branch level data. If I'm a regional person, I see a collection of branches. And if I was a corporate level person, for example, I would be allowed to see everything, just to give an example. So those are kind of the different levels of security within Birst. And it starts with creating roles within Infor OS that match roles that are within Birst to grant security.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What does Godlin offer in terms of ongoing support and enhancements for Birst setup after the quick start?
So we would work with any given customer, we would either extend the original statement of work, or we would work with, so we have our training content that we supply as part of this. That's part of it. The other part of it is making sure that customers understand how they could best leverage Infor U for certain training. And we're all about giving you as many options for training as you can have. So we facilitate making sure that we feel like we can point you in the right direction on what Birst content to use in Infor U, especially what's called there's certain core training in there that can be leveraged as well. There's Birst community that you can leverage for that, and then there's also the training that we do, and then often we might end up with other engagements to extend the use of Birst with customers, and we're here to kind of help you throughout that continuum.
Awesome, thank you. And the next question, APS assigns exception messages to jobs and POs. Are you able to import those at the job PO level to facilitate analysis?
We are bringing in APS planning data. The way in which people do their planning processes tends to be different across companies. So the short answer to your question is yes, but sometimes there's a little bit of detail around how we adjust that in certain reporting for a given customer. But we are integrating APS planning data to Birst, and we have that at our disposal, including any related data that's related to that from an item perspective, et cetera. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Next question, do you allow me to define OTD, or is it a fixed algorithm within Birst?
It's very common to getting into OTD calculations and adjust them. So the answer to your question is yes, we allow you to define it. And I will tell you that we've had debates with customers about measuring that from a customer order line item perspective, or measuring it based on a shipment perspective. So if you do it on a shipment perspective, the shipment has to occur in order for you to assess whether it's late. And so we've had some customers that say, no, I really want to look at it from the moment that customer order line item is still open. I want to assess whether it's early or late, and include that in my OTD calculation. So we have two ways of approaching it, both from either a shipment perspective or a customer order line perspective. And we can certainly work with customers to adjust the underlying calculation. But again, what we're trying to do is, okay, once we've done that, we want a single version of the truth so that there's consistency throughout.
Okay, thank you. Next question. We have had problems where we get an error that there's too much data. How can you help us with this?
We'd have to look at the specific scenario, but if you're saying too much data, so if there's, if you're talking about a tabular visualization that has 50,000 records in it, or a certain number of cells in it, we can look at, there's a place where you can bump that, but it's not to an infinite number inside Birst, in which you're trading is, some performance, things that you're trying to manage. So we'd have to get into the specifics of just how much data. What I tell people though is, yes, you can bring data into Birst and ultimately export it out the backside, but I tend to say, don't look at Birst from an ETL perspective of, I want to bring in a mass of data and I want to put out a mass of data. Really what you want to do is, I want to bring in lots of data to Birst and I want to analyze it in Birst. And yeah, there's a desire to export that data from time to time, but we'd have to look at the specific scenario. But there are some caps in terms of the data, and there might, what we could also talk about is, if this data is ending up in the data lake and you want to bring out a mass of data, should we be looking at taking that data that's been supplied by the ERP and taking it from the data lake instead, if you're really looking for a mass of data? So that gets back to that overall tool set that's delivered as part of just not Birst, but the things that surround it.
Okay. And then one more, well, we've actually got a few more questions. If we're not on the same cloud, how do you create our stuff?
Are you talking about you're not in the same cloud? I think it's probably you're not on the same cloud with the ERP deployments. I'm guessing. I don't know if there can be a clarification to that, but
Let's see if they type one. That's kind of open-ended, I guess.
yep.
Let's give them a second, see if they clarify that, because the
Yeah.
next question is big. Will Pat give a quick overview of the Birst architecture? Does it utilize a data warehouse, Mart, etc.?
So Birst has its own analytic database, and we are extracting data from the data lake. So it starts with the ERP, and you set up publishing from the ERP really at the table level to publish that data into Infor OS. And then I mentioned data fabric in one of my slides. So this is data fabric. And within data fabric, you have a data lake. And you can query this data lake. And basically what we're doing on the front end of Birst is we're querying the data out of the data lake and bringing it into Birst at a base level. And so again, this continuum, and if we're doing this for on-prem customers, then we're typically going back to the SQL database to get the data. So I don't want people to think, if you're on-prem, that this isn't for you, because it absolutely can be for you. Okay. So, but in a cloud world, there's automatic every time you touch a piece of master data, every time you do a transaction, it gets published to the data lake. In the front end connector of Birst, we're extracting that data and bringing it into Birst. And then we're doing this thing that I called modeling to get the data ready for reporting. Modeling has to do with framing the relationships across the data sources and perhaps doing some, extended calculations. And then I include in modeling this notion of creating what are called custom measures. So again, there's this in the front end of Birst, we will create an orchestration. So I'll just go into the admin functions here. But you create what are called orchestrations, and you schedule these orchestrations to wake up and bring data into Birst. And what you try to do is you can break down those orchestrations to squeeze the cycle time of updates so that you can run it more frequently. So I hope that answers the question, but it starts with publishing from the ERP to the data lake. Now, Infor is going to be extending some of these tools in the data lake to have what's called the lake house, which is going to be more structured data. But at present, we're pulling the data from the data lake data, bringing it into Birst, and relying on the analytic database that Birst has. There's often confusion between, Birst is the data lake, the Birst database, and the answer is technically no. They're two separate things. But in future, once we have this thing called Lakehouse and it's more structured data, that might eliminate the need for using, you might be able to go more directly to that and cut out the middleman. Okay. So I hope that helps with the
Awesome.
flow, and I'm happy to follow up on any of that, with a more detailed, Q&A offline.
Thank you. And one last question we have you used Infor Coleman AI with Birst?
We have, and so we've got Godlin as an organization has a product called Prophecy IoT, and speaks to you can automatically measure activity on your plant floor. So what we had done is collected the data, used the data that was collected by Prophecy, fed that data into a Coleman AI model, use the output from the Coleman AI model to visualize that data in Birst and look proactively at potential prospective machine failures, preventive maintenance, schedules, and things of that nature. So short answer is yes, but I wanted to give a little flavor for what we have done in the past to do that. And basically, we're taking the output from a Coleman AI model, in this case, is fed by Prophecy data to do that analysis. And just one final comment, and then looking for opportunities in this case to correlate that data to things like work centers as they come out of the ERP, so that you can build a cohesive data model and leverage data from various sources to build, a common data model.
Awesome. The other question that we've had a lot of is people asking about the recording, and as soon as we get it finalized, we will send it out to attendees.
Okay. And is that all the questions?
That is all the questions I have right now.
Okay. And then I think one other thing I was going to mention is that you can go to info at Godlin, Godlan.com if you want to send in independent inquiries if you think of things after the fact. We'll certainly send out the recording, but if you think of things after the fact, you can email to that. Again, it's info at Godlin.com if you've got further questions or interest in a follow-up. Okay.
All
I guess
right.
with
Thank
that,
you so much, Pat.
Yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time, and have a great rest of the day.